NASCAR President Steve Phelps admits the race teams are not profitable, but he does offer up some potential solutions. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. NASCAR is evolving before our very eyes. New car, new markets, new types of tracks, potentially new media partners before long, and hopefully a new revenue sharing agreement between NASCAR and the teams. Yesterday, NASCAR President Steve Phelps effectively outlined that exact issue. Phelps spoke during Race Industry Week and highlighted one of the key issues facing the race teams. He said, quote, "The race teams want three things, or so they've told us. They want to be competitive on the racetrack, which right now, that's a check. They want to increase the enterprise value of the charters, and that has been a check. And they want to have a path to profitability. That's not a check right now. They also want the charter system to be made permanent, but your CEO has pushed back against that idea, at least in the past. I'm not sure if his tune has changed. But focusing on that final statement there, that is the key issue." Steve Phelps continued, "Our race teams, by and large, are losing money at the cup level, and that is something we need to solve for them. We can solve that with two key pillars. One is to make sure that they are getting additional revenue. They're interested in getting more money from the sanctioning body and the tracks through the purse, and that is something that we need to do. Secondly, and not small, honestly, is some type of cost containment, whether that is in the form of a cap or whether that's in the form of the parts and pieces that make up the next gen car, trying to limit those pieces." Honestly, I love the transparency there from Steve Phelps, though his proposed solutions may not be popular. He came up with a fancy word there, not cost cutting, no, cost containment. I feel like I need to be smoking a pipe or something. Would that make me look more sophisticated? Almost dropped my glasses. Cost cutting by and large is not a popular idea amongst the garage, mainly because there's not much left to cut. The industry's already gotten a bit smaller with the introduction of a spec car, the next gen. We've already cut a lot out of the weekend schedule, much less practice, qualifying is abbreviated, just less track time than ever before. And the idea of a spending cap, I think, has been met with much skepticism. For one, how easy would that be for NASCAR to accurately track? And if a team did breach that cap, how easy would it be for NASCAR to enforce? Formula One has a cost cap, but teams in the past arguably have been hit with just a slap in the wrist for going over. I think Steve Phelps and NASCAR are actually coming from a very logical place here. They're fine giving the teams a larger share of the TV revenue. They're fine giving the teams more money. They just want assurance that the money will only go towards things that actually make the racing product better. I'm on board with that. It's just the feasibility. What more can be cut? I'm sure that's why negotiations between NASCAR and the teams have gone on so long. That and perhaps disagreements over making the charter system permanent. Though Phelps says right there, hey, they're very proud of what the charter system has become. He believes they've checked a box. Will they make them permanent though? Remains to be seen. That's another sticking point. But some very interesting comments there from Steve Phelps. At least I found them interesting. It kind of felt like a peek behind the curtain. Whether you like what he said or not, I got the impression he was being very candid, very honest. He pretty much explained NASCAR's side of these negotiations and sounds willing, potentially, to compromise. While we're on the topic of NASCAR evolving, trying to grow their brand, it's obvious that NASCAR is still trying to find sustained relevancy. NASCAR is still relevant in spurts. The Hail Melon, Ryan Preece's crash, the Chicago street race, flash in the pan moments. They're still seeking that sustained relevancy. And I guess this is kind of off topic from what we were just discussing, but I was recently asked why I became a NASCAR fan. I don't watch a ton of other motorsports. I watch some IndyCar races. I keep up with Formula One here and there. I keep up with many of the big short track races around the country. Snowball Derby coming up. But ever since I was a kid, no motorsport has hooked my attention quite like NASCAR. And I was asked, why? And I never really seriously reflected on it. And I think I figured out that NASCAR stuck with me because it's the most relatable. Obviously, first and foremost, they race stock cars. High-powered, trimmed out stock cars, but stock cars. Cars reminiscent of what I see on the road every single day, cars that I drive. Obviously, they're not remotely similar, but at least they look the same. There's a relatability factor that F1, for example, does not have. And again, comparing to F1, NASCAR is unapologetically American. Jets flying over, prayer before the race, events coast to coast, north and south. I'm American, shoot, it's much easier for me to relate to Texas Motor Speedway, the Chicago street race, than it is Abu Dhabi. Again, that's just for me personally. And even the playoffs. I understand not everyone likes the playoffs, and the playoffs aren't perfect, and racing is very different from traditional stick and ball sports, but I think one of the reasons I've been more comfortable buying into the idea of playoffs is because I watch a ton of other sports. Growing up, I watched baseball, basketball, football. I got used to the idea of there being, games or races at the end of the season that matter more than the regular season. You have to bring your best when it matters most. That idea just makes sense to me. NASCAR is relatable. The brands involved in NASCAR are relatable. I ate M&Ms all the time as a kid. My first diecast I remember having was an Ernie Irvan M&M's 36. My dad has DeWalt power tools in the garage. I used to eat McDonald's Happy Meals all the time. I'm loyal to brands, and many of those brands I see in NASCAR. Again, relatable. So I know, I apologize, I've gotten off on a bit of a tangent here, but all this talk about cutting costs, about what can we do to grow the sport, we need the drivers, we need the teams to promote the sport more, the tracks need to promote more, we need more sellouts. At the end of the day, NASCAR is best when it's relatable. It's an American sport, it should be relatable to the average American. I know I'm bouncing all over the place, but back to branding, sponsorship. I read an article from Adam Stern, Sports Business Journal recently, where he listed several key points of interest for the NASCAR industry going into 2024. And among them, he argued that NASCAR needs to seek sponsorship wins. He included a quote from Jim Richards, who is the president and CEO of the Market Share Group, who represents several sponsors who advertise in NASCAR. And Richards said, quote, "If we can get back to talking about the fans, I think consumer brands will come back. But we should be concerned that Smithfield is not coming back, that M&M's didn't come back. That's telling in some ways, and I think everyone needs to put some effort around addressing it." I'm way off in the weeds now, but yeah, growing up, Tony Stewart was the Home Depot car. Rusty Wallace was Miller Lite. Kyle Busch was the M&M's car. You got a home improvement store, beer, candy, snacks, all very relatable products, brands, and all three of those sponsors I just named, iconic 15, 20 years ago, no longer in the sport. NASCAR needs a consistent identity. Is that oval racing? Is that street courses? Is that a mix of both? Is that America? Is that international? See, NASCAR is kind of testing all sorts of different waters right now, and in some ways I think that's good. In other ways, I worry that inconsistency is a bad thing. The same way 20 years ago it was easy to instantly recognize Dale Earnhardt Jr. on the track because he drove the same red number 8 Budweiser Chevy each week. We now have a dozen different sponsors on the 8 car throughout the course of a season. Many of them not very recognizable brands. Like I saw this graphic from Richard Childress Racing. Great that so many sponsors are invested in RCR in the team, but from a fan's perspective, particularly a newer or more casual fan, what is the 8 car's brand today? Like if I was to buy a Kyle Busch t-shirt, which one do I buy? 30 years ago, if you were to explain to someone what NASCAR is, it was oval racing, primarily in the South, Southeast, stock cars, rough, using the bumpers, straightforward. How would you explain NASCAR today? Is it ovals? Yeah, mostly, but there's quite the variety. They race in a football stadium now on the West Coast. NASCAR raced at Le Mans this year, the 24 hours. I guess if I were to try and draw a conclusion here, and I know, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place in this video. It's late. Can you see my eyes are red? I need sleep. But to conclude, I don't necessarily think it's bad that NASCAR is evolving, is trying all these different things, but I guess at some point you need to figure out what your identity truly is. Because if you don't know exactly what your identity is, how can you expect the general public to figure it out? It's super broad, I know, but I believe NASCAR's identity is relatability. Especially if you're an American, NASCAR is the most relatable motorsport. In some ways, it's the most relatable sport in the country. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think a cost cap or some similar measure would work in NASCAR? And what direction do you think NASCAR should head if they want to grow their brand and find, again, that sustained relevancy that they've desperately been seeking for, I don't know, the better part of a couple decades now? Leave a comment down below. Again, I apologize, this episode was all over the place. I think I had notes for like 2 separate videos and I tried to pack them into one. Too many ideas, not enough screen time, I suppose, but I appreciate you bearing with me. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you're new to the channel. We've got you covered all off-season long, and a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. I will be out of town the next few days, but I've got a couple fun off-season videos planned, so you will see those shortly. Thanks for tuning in, folks. I'll catch you in the next episode.